Mary, have we got most people in right now? Okay. Okay, good evening, everybody. I'm Trudy Peterson. I coordinate Village Voices for Capitol Hill Village, and welcome everyone. This, as you know, is a monthly program of the Capitol Hill Village. It is being recorded, so if you want to say something, remember that your remarks are being recorded. If you have questions during our presentation and you think you're going to forget them by the end of the talk, please use the chat function. And Mary Bloodworth, without whom this program would not go on, and I will watch that chat box very carefully, and we'll make sure we get back to your comments and questions at the end of the presentation. Before we go to tonight, though, let me remind you that there are two more programs coming up in this autumn series. On November 12, a Wednesday, we will have Melissa Ho, who has a wonderful variety of backgrounds as a scientist, as a policy advisor, and she's going to do a little food system forecast for us right before the food-rich holidays that are coming up. And then on Tuesday, December 2, we're going to have the current director of the Folger Library, who's going to be talking about her recent book, Can You Love Shakespeare and Be an Anti-Racist? I noticed that she is doing a similar program across town at Theater J, but you don't have to go across town. Just wait and tune in the 2nd of December and she'll be with us instead. So that's the upcoming programming. My thanks, of course, to Mary Bloodworth and Judy Berman, without whom nothing at the village would run. My thanks for publicity to Maygene Daniels and Karen Stuck, without whom you would never know that we're doing programming. So with those thanks, let me turn to our night's speaker. Actually, we're really lucky. We're going to have two people. The headline speaker is Jill Strachan. She was born in Athens. She spent her childhood accompanying her U.S. Foreign Service parents around. She lived in Pakistan and Egypt and Sri Lanka, accompanied, I believe, by Fowl. As an adult, she had a career working with nonprofits, including time at the Capitol Hill Arts Workshop, where many of us got to know her. And she's now written a book of essays that tracks her life experiences. When we invited Jill, she said, "Could I have an interlocutor? I have this friend, Doug Ewell. He was a former executive director at Atlas Performing Arts Center." And we said, "Gee, that's great." So with that, Doug, Jill, it's yours.
Well, thank you, Trudy and Mary and the Capitol Hill Village for inviting me or having us on this evening. And I'm going to introduce Doug, and he will be the interlocutor, as we said, the interrogator, the questioner. But before we really get to heavy questions, I'm going to also read a couple of selections from my second book, which is titled Boundaries, Borders, Crossings, One Lesbian Life 2.0. And it came out last March, and I have been able to do a few book talks, but they're all wonderful experiences. I hope for the people who attend them, but also for me, because I learned so much about what people find in my book and what resonates with them, and get really, this is a wonderful way to get criticism in the best sense of the word, and to use that to build further writing projects. So the name of my book is, I'll hold it up, Boundaries, Borders, Crossings, One Lesbian Life 2.0. And the first section I'm going to read is has to do with my being a volunteer delivery person for an organization in Washington, D.C. called Food and Friends. And the title of my chapter is Food and Friends writes food, ampersand friends. That's the name of the organization. And the name of my chapter is Food and the word AND Friends. So this is my first, I'm going to do 2 readings. This is my first one. The slip of paper told me to go to an address near 5th and K Streets Northeast for my next delivery. There I met Dwayne, who had no food allergies. I was carrying a large paper sack containing a nutritious 3-course prepared meal with rolls. Instructions told me to ring the doorbell. Dwayne greeted me. He was tall, in his early 40s, with a likable smile. He was a client of a Washington, D.C. nonprofit, Food and Friends, and Dwayne had AIDS. It was the late 1980s, and I was volunteering on Tuesdays to deliver meals for Food and Friends. My rounds were in Northeast and Southeast city quadrants, and I performed them from the steering wheel of my red diesel VW Rabbit. The hatchback accommodated 8 to 10 bags of prepared meals. It took about an hour and a half to finish my route. Almost as soon as he opened the door, Dwayne mentioned his love of gardening. He lived in a 1920s era dilapidated townhouse with a postage stamp size front garden. He did not mention another plot in the back. I noticed his fingers were distended, and he told me he had neuropathy in his hands, making gardening impossible. His eyes filled with tears as he described the disabling pain keeping him from what he loved best. My special friend Pete Meehan died of AIDS in the early dark days of the crisis. Our deep bond had remained steady after college, even with Pete in Chicago and me in DC. We communicated by phone and letter, managing in-person visits once or twice annually. When his health deteriorated, we relocated our visits to the hospital and to his home. Pete shared his health issues, which included pneumocystis pneumonia, hepatitis, unknown chemical balance issues, Kaposi sarcoma, and AIDS. There were few services for AIDS patients then, nothing approaching the work of Food and Friends established in 1988. That meant AIDS patients relied on family and friends for help. In many instances, AIDS patients had no family, estranged for their homosexuality. My expectation was I would deliver meals to white gay men, but my premise was false. Most of my deliveries were to African American men living close to my apartment. There were no women on my list. I was unaware of the situation in the city, as my personal community was white with just a handful of people of color. Delivering was an education for me, a window revealing the economic disparity of DC, with those most in need primarily sequestered in the Northeast and Southeast quadrants. I wept on my route from frustration with the truncated and incorrect driving instructions provided on the tiny pieces of white paper. They served as a receptacle for my grief. Grief at losing Pete, sorrow at the loss of others too numerous to list, fear of how many more friends I would lose, and anger at the active ignorance displayed by the US government. The Food and Friends clients were not the only ones who died. Like my peers, I was acquainted with the ravages of AIDS. All of us lost community leaders, friends, friends of friends, lovers, colleagues, students, family members, and acquaintances. We soothed each other and shared our anger for these deaths, unacknowledged by our government and blatantly discounted by President Ronald Reagan and his administration. We marched in protest, held sit-ins at government buildings, attended funerals and memorial services, and sang songs to express our frustration and disappointment. Pre-internet and social media, I scoured the Washington Post for obituaries daily. My eye became practiced at finding the obituaries of people who had died of AIDS. Shame accompanied the disease, and the utterance of its name dissolved the closet's protective curtain for people who had led their lives in secret. The young age of a dead person was a strong clue. Word of mouth was a reliable method. Some deaths came swiftly after confirmation of an AIDS diagnosis. I do not recall reading an obituary for any of my Food and Friends clients. Dwayne had appeared regularly on my schedule. On my last run, he answered his door, smiling, and showed me his hands, waving his fingers. A sudden, painful cramp grabbed my stomach, but I returned his smile. He explained the doctors had amputated his fingertips to minimize his neuropathy pain. It was closer to spring, and he was planting his garden. His happiness came at profound cost, with no cure in the long run. So before I lived in Washington, D.C. on my own, as Trudy mentioned, I'm a third culture kid, which is a kid raised in a culture other than their parents. And that is a designation that many foreign service children, military children, uh, people whose parents have been missionaries or worked abroad for whatever reason. So it's a relatively new term to me, but it was first expressed in the 1950s. And when I found out about it, it gave me a lot of information about my own childhood and what happened to me as a result of being a third culture kid. And most of it is good. So, but I wanted to read a little segment about living in Lahore, Pakistan. I was about 10 or 11 years old. And this is a story about my duck, Willie, whom I won in a toss game, unbeknownst to my parents. So we had a big house, and my father's position required a lot of entertaining. And there was a patio out back where a lot of the cocktail hours happens. That's sort of the setting. My duck Willie lived near the small pool in the backyard. Willie did not like water. He was not interested in hygiene, and he was the filthiest white duck who ever lived. To the side of our backyard, the builder provided modest servants' quarters, accommodating several members of our household staff and their families. Willie was sociable and visited the servants, who sprayed him with a hose to clean him up. When evening events took over the back patio, Willie made his way under cover of darkness to sit under some unsuspecting person's chair, revealing himself when the guest stood up. Willie had a gentle quack, which he might have admitted at that moment, but he retreated without delay to the privacy of the grass below the patio. In contrast to Willie's stardom as an uninvited guest, the patio was the scene of my biggest musical disaster. I had been taking clarinet lessons for about a year with the Lahore Police Band in its military garrison. Until writing this, I remembered the name as the Pakistani Army Band. Allow me to correct my memory. I link my chief visual memory of Lahore to driving through the cantonment on our way to my lesson. It was a green enclave dating from British times, containing upscale housing and, compared to other sections of the city, many trees and gardens. The forbidding Zamzama gun, built in 1757, rested in the middle of the roadway outside the museum. The gun is a monstrous cannon, and it featured in Rudyard Kipling's novel, Kim. I like to recite a version of the inscription on its base as we drove by. Whoever shall hold the Zamzama will hold the valley of the Punjab. Zamzama means mighty fire dispensing dragon. My resolute mother made this arrangement with the police band after a futile search for a private teacher. She wanted to console me for leaving the U.S., my friends, and my extracurricular activities, which in addition to the clarinet included ballet and piano lessons. Once a week, she accompanied me to the police barracks. She parked the car outside a window, looking into the rehearsal space, and read a book while I played with the all-male band. Given the environment, I learned the Pakistani national anthem, Pak Shahjamin, a song of stately beauty. The police musicians accepted my participation in their rehearsals. It was, to state the obvious, very unusual for a little white girl from the US to be sitting in their musical ranks. I did not feel self-conscious, although I could have, at least as I think of the situation years later. The musicians were friendly and helped with the band leader's instructions. He must have been speaking in Urdu, of which I knew just a few words. I am sure the obvious presence of my mother outside the window reinforced good behavior by everyone, including her daughter. For a party celebrating a Pakistani national holiday, my parents asked me to play Pak Shahjamin on my clarinet. I agreed to the assignment. They set the performance at 9 p.m. on the balcony overlooking the beautiful patio. 50-plus chattering guests congregated below, glasses in hand. As rehearsed, I walked to the balcony's edge and started playing. No one heard the clarinet over the din, except for my parents, and they were too late in shushing the crowd. There was not a quack from my friend Willie, or at least I could not hear one, although I was confident he was below. When I finished my performance, instead of applause, noisy chatter rose from the patio. Humiliated and angry, I burst into tears and ran to my bedroom. My parents found me there, my head covered by a pillow. Despite their efforts to comfort me and their entreaties for a repeat performance, I remained inconsolable, and my embarrassment made me give up. I liked attention from adults and felt ashamed of my performance, although it was not my fault. Mother abandoned her valiant efforts to nurture my juvenile interest in the clarinet upon my return stateside. I found other teenage interests, and its appeal waned, and I never took clarinet lessons again, although I have the music book from the Pakistani police band. I love the clarinet's warm, sometimes melancholic sound. I don't think I could play a single note today if I still possessed my clarinet. My musical mortification faded. There were other embarrassments to follow, since life has quite a few to offer us. And I thought, it's not really show and tell, but I have a picture of my duck Willie. So thank you for your attention and for listening. And Doug, here you go.
Okay, great. Well, first off, thank you to everyone. Thank you, Capital Village, for having me here. Jill, of course, thank you for wanting me to be here to help ask some questions, and certainly for being such a great and wonderful friend. As you know, Jill, from reading the book and from our conversations, I'm always so deeply amazed, impressed, and awe about your life and your growing up and the experiences that you had that I could only, I don't even know if I could dream of these experiences that you've had growing up and in your life. But it's really quite wonderful to read your books and to read these stories and hear about these stories and to know that they're true. And what's also really interesting is, yes, I too, through you, learned about third culture kids. And I know that you continue to be in touch with some of your third culture kids. And there's a group of you that do get together and have conversations. And so one of the first questions I wanted to ask is just about the whole third culture kid. You gave a brief description of that, but um, within that, what were things that you have discovered or you discovered, you shared with third culture youth that you grew up with that are now adults? Just how are you guys adjusting and living in the world, and what are your similarities and what are your differences?
Well, based on my very small sample, I would say we're doing pretty well. But the way I found out about third culture kids was I was participating in a group, a Zoom group called Cairo American College. So that's the CAC, and we call ourselves the Cackles. And we meet about once a month, and somebody in our group gives a presentation. And the way that we're linked is that we all attended Cairo American College, which was a high school, international high school in Cairo, Egypt, in a period of time between 1960 and 1970. We didn't all know each other. We didn't necessarily overlap, but we have this common experience of being at this really singular high school. And so we have members from Norway, Japan, and all across the United States and France as well. And so what we share is, I think, of course, the high school that we went to, but I think what third culture kids, at least what I experienced very deeply, was the fact that your life as a child could change overnight. For example, my father got a telegram when we were living in Cairo, Egypt in 1965. And it came during the night, and it was from President Johnson telling him that he was to report to Vietnam within 2 days. And so our lives just became completely um, uh, mixed up, and he took off, and my mother decided that she would stay in Cairo till the end of the school year, so I didn't have to be taken out of school and put somewhere immediately where I didn't know anybody. And so we stayed until June, and then we came home, and he was still in Vietnam. So that is not an unusual experience for Foreign Service kids or other kids, but I'm just talking about Foreign Service kids, as that's what I am. And I think in me particularly, I always had a very strong feeling that I didn't want to lose my friends. And so I became a letter correspondent very early in life. My mother was a great example. She wrote lots of letters. But I always was writing to my friends. And when they didn't write me back, because that's not something everybody does, it was kind of devastating to me because it was such an important lifeline. And the thing about being different in America before we became more of a global nation was that every time I ever talked about my experiences, if I mentioned Cairo, people would say, "Oh, did you ride a camel to school?" Well, it couldn't be further from the truth. We took buses like everybody does, or most people do. And some people walked because they live very close to the school. So those kinds of questions, very irritating, very constant, never any willingness from my comparable American teenagers at that point in my life to ever want to know anything more than that. So I think I don't want to go on and on about it. And I don't think there are lots of teenage experiences. And this was mine. And so I think what happened to me personally, and from talking to my other third culture kids friends, we kind of covered up our childhood, our experiences, and made them less significant in our life, at least as they amounted to talking to other people, if that makes any sense.
Great, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Now, with Boundaries, Borders, Crossings, One Lesbian Life 2.0. What is the 2.0?
Well, I had a previous book. I have a previous book, I shouldn't say I have it. And it's called Waterfalls, the Moon, and Sensible Shoes, One Lesbian Life. So this is 2.0. And one might ask, what is different? Well, my first book, I think, was more of a traditional memoir, more chronological, and focused on what is commonly called a coming out story. And this book, I think, allowed me to actually dig a little bit deeper. And also, I wanted to make sure that my identity as a lesbian was not lost. So I put it in the title again. And since it was the second book, I put 2.0. And this question of lesbian identity is a very interesting and provocative one, I think, because lesbians, at least my experience of being a lesbian is that we can be pretty invisible. And sometimes that's a choice, but sometimes it's a cultural, social choice that is made by other people. And so we're lumped in with gay men, and I love my fellow gay brothers, but we are different. We have a different identity. And so it's really important to me to put that in my title and to talk about my experience as a lesbian as I grew more comfortable with the identity and as I age. And the interesting thing is that the word lesbian is fading even more because we have such wonderful words as queer, which has supplanted gay as the overall term for people who live a lesbian or a gay lifestyle, etc., LGBTQ plus. So it became even more important to me that I put that name right on the book and that I talk about it. And also, as an author, you can make so many choices. So I decided I would capitalize lesbian every time I used it in my books. And I also capitalized the word feminist because for me, I think those are two really important words and they get lost.
Mhm, mhm. Jill, knowing your history, I know family has really been a very strong element of within your life, as it is for many people. But what is the role or the impact of family in the creation of this work?
Well, for starters, I think my mother, I mentioned she was a very consistent letter writer, but not only did she write letters, she made carbon copies of every letter that she wrote, including letters to me in boarding school and in college. And then she stapled her response to the letter that she was responding to. So I had this, before I even started, I was like going through these boxes I had of her letters and her journals and some letters from my father. He was also a letter writer, but not to the extent that she was. And I thought to myself, oh my goodness, these are so amazing. And here are people who have, lived these incredible lives and are no longer with us. And, the fact of death is that you disappear. Um, People remember you, but it's not the same as being alive by any chance. So I thought, well, I would just embark upon sort of doing a nice um, overview of their lives. And so I had these amazing letters and journals, and I started there. So it actually did start with my family. And I think both my parents were very interesting individuals in and of themselves and had a great impact on the people around them.
Mhm. Jill, I know, and outside of the familial connections and the familial stories, and certainly the great writing of your mother and even your father, um, I know that also just friends and loved ones that you've had so many wonderful relationships with individuals over the years that are quite precious to you. What what is the impact of friends and loved ones in the creation of this work?
Well, that's a great question, Doug. Um, I think in this book in particular, there's a sort of I guess, a novella is one of the essays is much longer than the others, and it's entitled Have Lesbian Will Travel. And it's about a road trip I took with my friend Fred, who sang with me in the Lesbian and Gay Chorus of Washington. And he had a diagnosis of HIV, and he decided that he was going to go live in San Francisco, the Emerald Empire. for gay men at the time. No matter what, he wanted to do that before he died. And so he asked me to, and he didn't want to drive himself. That was the other thing. Doesn't like to drive. So he asked me if I would drive him to California and that he would pay all the gas. And the only stipulation was that if something happened to the car, that I was going to have to talk to the mechanic, that he wouldn't do that. So we had a great friendship, and so it was my absolute pleasure to write up our story on the road with Fred. And he's still in my life. We still talk once a month. He's still living in San Francisco, and he did not die yet. So that's great. And it was a great move for him, I think, and as much as I miss him. And I think that relationship is just one of many that I've had the privilege of having.
Great. Jill, you alluded a little bit to this as far as the writings of your mother and letter writing and the source material. Or maybe could you go a little deeper into what was your process in creating this work, and what challenges did you face in creating this work?
Faith in myself, I would say, because I didn't. I've always loved writing, and I've always had been writing creatively. But once I had what one calls these days a career, it was really hard to do that kind of writing when you're writing. I know you know nothing about this, Doug. Writing grants, writing press releases, writing crazy social media, which fortunately I passed out before that really became a thing. But all of my writing got engaged in this, very utilitarian and important writing. So when I retired in 2017, I didn't really think that I was going to write, but as I was reading those letters, I felt like I could feel the urge come back. And so I wrote quite a bit, and then I felt like I had to show it to somebody, somebody wasn't necessarily a friend, but a friendly person who knew something about me. And there was a young man who was going to grad school in English, and he was kind enough to take me on as an editing project. And it worked really, really well. Of course, I hasten to say I paid him. Of course, he was a poor graduate student. So anyway, he helped me a lot. And because he was somebody who was known to me but a bit distant, he could be critical. And it was really interesting. We had a lot of funny exchanges. For example, he didn't know what an aerogram was, and I had talked about that in my first book, because a lot of the letters that I had were these horrible aerograms that you can hardly read now. And he didn't know what it was, so it took me like 4 tries to write a description of it that ended up in the book that he was satisfied with. He had never seen one. I don't know if he's seen one to this day, but anyway. So that was kind of fun. And then another friend of a friend who wrote lesbian detective stories in the 90s. She was very kind, and she was quite popular. Her detective is named Nell Fury, Fury, and the detective lives in San Francisco. Anyway, Elizabeth, I won't use her last name, but she was very, very supportive of my work and very willing to read it. And she gave me lots of great criticism. So I think it's really, writing is such a wonderful process, but you're probably doing it by yourself initially. And so it's a risk to show it to someone else, even if you believe in it, which I did. But I find the process of criticism to be wonderful. I enjoy it, and I'm very challenged by it, and I don't worry about it. So I love feedback, and I wish in my nonprofit world I had more not I had more feedback of that sort rather than the kind of feedback you tend to get as when you have a job. So
Great. Hey, Jill, I just saw this question pop up on the chat. Are you an only child?
no, I have a sister who's 9 years older than I am, and so our lives were very disparate when I was a child because she often was elsewhere in
Mhm.
college, etc. Plus, you know, when you're young, I don't know how much you know about your siblings, your older sibling. So she was much more like a parent, and she didn't mind acting like my parent. And she was crucial to being my parent when my parents were overseas and we were here in DC. She took care of me. I lived with her a couple of summers and stuff like that. Yeah.
Great, 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 great. So, Jill, thank you for sharing about process and challenges. But I'm going to ask you, why is it important for you to write this book? And why is writing this book a part of political activism?
I think to tell your story is a political action. It uh, it means that you can't be ignored. People might want to ignore you or try to ignore you, but once you've written your story, it's out there. And so I see that as a political act, an individual speaking his or her own power, their power. And so to me, everything that I've written, even if it sounds mostly humorous at times or um, autobiographical, I write for a reason, and that is to say, I'm here and I'm not going away. And I really, really hope that more people join uh, and do this kind of writing. It's become more and more popular, memoir, in the time I've been writing. Um, and I think the political power that it conveys is still untapped to some extent.
Right. Um, so now I'm going to ask this because you mentioned this gentleman in the book. Who is Paul Preston, and how is the beauty he shared so impactful to you?
Paul and I met in college. He was kind of scary to me when I first met him because I was in the audience and he was on the stage introducing films for this student group called uh, documentary films, doc films, we called it. You could go to the movies 3 or 4 nights a week for like $1 each, and they had really, really fantastic movies. One time, Jane Fonda came for her movie, her not so popular movie, and or popular but very highly criticized movie, I should say. Anyway, Paul had a crop of hair that he really didn't do anything. Like it just grew. And so when Jane Fonda came, he was introducing the film and he decided, as he often did, that he should wear a costume that actually related to the film. And so he dressed in a cellophane outfit, a dress with very scanty underwear. And then he had this hair. And I'm sitting in the audience. I was just so, I would say I was quite conservative about certain things. And I found him to be just kind of scary. I mean, I couldn't believe anybody would do that if they didn't have to. So, but he did it all in jest. And one time he told me years later that in high school, he went to a Halloween party dressed up as a carrot. So he wrapped him, somebody wrapped him all up and in orange. And then he dyed his hair green. His hair was dyed green. and his parents dropped him off at the party, and he got out of the car. And what he didn't realize was there was this huge hill that he had to walk up to get to the party. And he started up the hill and he fell down. And nobody heard him. This carrot, this giant carrot lying on the lawn. So he was kind of like that. He was just always fun and had a great laugh. And he went on to write a really important book in the deaf community called Mother, Father, Deaf. It's been translated into at least 5 or 6 languages, including Japanese. And it talked about the children of deaf adults, CODA, which is now a very important concept. But he wrote about this in the 80s, late 80s, early 90s, and about his own experience as a child of deaf parents. So a very interesting person. And unfortunately, he died some couple of years ago. So I decided, because he'd been so supportive of my writing, and his writing was fantastic, I have to say, that I would dedicate the book to him.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. You also mention relative to this book that how is having someone read this book a gift to you?
It is so wonderful because people tell me all kinds of things about which things in the book they related to, and what made them laugh, what made them cry, what made them think. And I think for me, it kind of reinforces the notion that what I wrote is relatable to many different people. Surely to lesbians, because I'm a lesbian, but also to third culture kids or anybody who grew up in similar ways. And so it's such a gift to think that my life could provide that sort of insight for others.
Mhm, mhm, mhm. So I have one other question, and then certainly it would be great to see if there are other questions or thoughts or comments from others. I know, yes, the book launched back in March, and it's been several months, and you've traveled here and there and spoken here and there and bookstores and spoken to a lot of people. Um, what what new have you discovered from your work, or what are some thoughts or impressions that you didn't have then but now have? How is this process of writing and bringing it forward, sharing it with others, how has that brought you new information and new insight?
Great question. I think I do want to write some more, and I guess my question is, of course, what would I write about? And when people talk to me about the book and what they found in it, that's always helpful. In my mind, I think that I might write something about aging. And I think I'm not quite sure what form that's going to take, or what exactly it would be, but that's kind of where I'm headed. And it's logical, I guess, because I am 76 years old now, recently 76. And I was just thinking about my parents, because when my father retired at the age of 70, and my mother, or 71, and my mother was 67, they went to Europe for 9 months and drove around. Didn't make any hotel reservations, just made this wonderful trip. And my partner Jane and I were just in Spain for 2.5 weeks. And I kept thinking about how how I was older than them just slightly, but what they did, and what's left in life for me. So
Mhm. Great. Well, it's been a pleasure for me personally, and to be able to delve deep into your work and to have read your books and to have learned about your stories and to learn about your life. And as I said in the very beginning, it's awesome. It's just intriguing. It's funny. It's sad. It just it's a great read. It's great stories. It's many stories that, yes, I think we all can relate to, that sense of relation to. I can remember the time, I can remember the places, and how it connects, and how your life in many ways is connected to my life through certain historical incidences and certain places that you've been and I've been. So it's really quite wonderful. I'd love to know if there are those that have actually had an opportunity to read the book. If there are other questions or thoughts to share with Jill, I would love to be able to open it up and allow that to take place in the time that we have left.
Well, thank you so much, Jill and Doug, for this wonderful explanation of Jill's current work, past work, and future work as far as we see it. Um, I'm not seeing hands right now, so I'm going to take the pleasure of asking a couple questions. Um, a third world kid, you must look at the world very differently from someone who grew up as I did on a farm in northwest Iowa. How do you think that experience has changed the way you view the world today, and especially world politics in areas like Egypt, where you've lived and know something about?
well, wow, the world is so much more complicated, isn't it? Than it used to be even 20 years ago. Um, in my family, we always talked politics, and we always studied where we were living, and then also followed these countries after we left. So I would have uh, an interest as a teenager in what is happening in Pakistan because I had a Pakistani friend that I left there. And my parents would talk about world affairs at the dinner table, etc. So I think that was a really unusual experience in the time period I grew up. But I have observed that forces in the world that are greater than any one person have created an atmosphere where it's very important to know what's happening in the world. And perhaps I have, a slight leg up because I lived in Egypt, so I can imagine when I talk about Egypt, what uh, Cairo looked like when I was there. I know it's doubled, tripled in population since we lived there. But I have a sense of maybe what people face day to day, not, in depth, but I do have something that was given to me by my background. And so I am very, as an adult, very interested. I always have been in world politics. For a long time, it was really hard to get any kind of information in the legacy press about anything in a place like Egypt or Lahore, Pakistan. That's changed. There's lots more information out there. And I find that people are much more informed, much more willing to talk about these things because it's a necessity. We all live on this planet and we all have to understand each other.
Do you pay special attention to gay rights issues in those countries where you've lived, or?
Yes, unfortunately, I think, that's still, I spent some time in Uganda on a contract in the 80s and just reading about what happens there to people like me, it's just so distressing. And of course, what can we do about it? I think one important thing, again, getting back to telling your story, it, if everyone is telling their story, there's somebody out there who needs to hear it, and you can change that person's life or give them hope.
Of the places you lived, you've spoken about Pakistan and about Egypt. Did you have a favorite place? Was there a place that you just really hated leaving?
I would say Egypt. I was about 15 years old when we left, and I really thought my life had ended. I couldn't imagine going to school in the States. I actually knew where I was going to school because I had been in boarding school in Virginia in seventh grade. And so I went back there as a day student, and then I ended up boarding in my senior year. And I hated it as a seventh grader. So the thought that I was going back there, I just thought, oh my God, my life is over. But I did a lot of writing to friends, letters, all kinds of different friends. They didn't all respond, but that really kind of kept me alive. And later in life, having a journal, I think that helped too, particularly when I was living in Strasbourg for a year when I was in graduate school. And my journal was very important to me because my community was so small. And I mean, I knew other students and stuff, but I was just there for eight or 9 months. So being able to write about what I experienced was really important.
I can see from the names of people on this call that we've got some people who also spent time as children growing up in other countries. And I wondered if any of you wanted to comment on what Jill has just said. Did I see Mary Proctor's hand?
Yeah, I haven't, you did see my hand, but I was talking about something close to home, which is I loved the years that Jill was the director of CHAW. And it might seem very tame to her now with all of her experiences. But I wondered if there was something special that you got out of CHAW. Um, it's an unusual kind uh, of entity because it has musical, it had instruments and singing and ceramics and painting and acting and you name it. And
Yeah.
it's in a pretty small building. And that's something I loved and my children loved. And so I'd love to have your sense, having lived all over the world, what it was like to be, were you there 10 years, something like that?
I was Mary. Hi, Mary.
Hi.
Hi. Well, CHA was the best job of my life, I have to say. It was such an incredible experience, even toiling to keep it funded,
Yes,
which every
I was
nonprofit
part of
executive
that.
must do as part of the job. But the number of people and children and who came through the door and the faculty, everybody was so interesting and different and loved the place because they found a place where they were comfortable. And so I miss that.
Yeah, my daughter had a very severe flute teacher and then was taken over by, I don't remember the name of the teacher, but she liked doing what Shaw believed in, which is that music makes you happy. That's music help forms a community. And the other teachers are not that way. They want you to perform in a way that shows them off, I think. So she ended up loving the flute because of that.
That's interesting, really a great observation. And the mission statement remains building community through the arts.
Yeah,
And I think that was why I was so happy there.
that's great to
Hmm.
hear.
Even without a clarinet.
Yes, without a clarinet, yes.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, anyone else want to comment on this?
I,
And Grace.
Trudy, I just wanted to comment. I did grow up outside the United States until I was around 12 years old and came to the United States. And what you said previously about having grown up, it carries with you, it carries through you because you have a broader world.
Yeah.
And that was one of the disappointments when I came to the United States as an expat, is that the people that I met, the children I met, had no interest in the world beyond their what I called little world. As a 12-year-old, I didn't really understand that. But it took a long time for me to accommodate that, I guess is the best way to say it. So I appreciated your insight into that, because it's a hard way to learn about the country that really is who you are in the end.
Right.
But I appreciated your comment on that. Thank you.
Thank
Do the
you.
two of you think that because you came to the States as teenagers, that made it even more difficult? If you'd come back as a 6-year-old, maybe it wouldn't have been
Oh,
so
yeah.
hard.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I mean, you're lost. I was lost. I didn't know where I was, who I was. At that age, you're learning who you are in the first place. Even if you've grown up in a town,
Mhm.
you're still trying to figure out what your world is.
Right.
But you've left your world behind. So I think you had the same issue, and you were moving to a school that you knew about that you didn't like. I at
Yeah.
least didn't have that experience. But it
I
was
used to write to my parents, and I
Oh.
would write in the return address, my name, Misery House, Hardship Lane,
Oh,
Alexandria, Virginia.
Oh.
oh my. Oh
It was
dear.
hard. It was
Yeah,
hard.
Mhm.
it was hard. It was definitely hard. Yeah.
Whole nother world.
Um, uh,
And
uh,
I have to say, there's this, in my life anyway, this strange resonance between coming out as a lesbian in my 20s, late 20s, and then finding out at the age of 72 that I'm a third culture kid, which is also coming out and starting to talk about it. And so it's this sort of match set that I had no idea really. It happened, and thanks for my friends from Cairo American College. Otherwise, I wouldn't have known about it, I don't think.
Well, and it doesn't go away.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't ever adjust. It's really who you are,
Yep.
the good and the bad part. Yeah.
Yep.
well, with that lovely comment, unless I see any other questions or comments here, thank you, Jill. Thank you, Doug, for doing this. It's been a really good hour, and remember everyone that on the 12th of November, we will have Melissa Ho talking about a forecast on our food system. So until that, thank you very much.
Judy, can I
Judy,
say one last thing?
Sure.
That my book is available at eCity Books. So if anybody wants it, just a plug for our wonderful bookstore.
Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jill and Doug.
Thank you.